Hi there, I'm Eddie Smith, co-founder and president of the U.S. Prayer Center in Houston, Texas. And I've been asked to address the issue of trust in relationship. There is a great danger of misplaced trust. So imagine my surprise when I was at an international missions conference back in the early 90s in Seoul, Korea, at the International Missions Office there. And we were having lunch, and I heard a gentleman from a table, there were perhaps 100 of us at that lunch, and I heard a gentleman from the South Sea Islands say to somebody at his table near me, there's not a verse in the Bible that tells you to trust anybody. That kind of stuck in my mind because my trust had been violated many times, and I came home to Houston, where I live, with the idea that I'm going to check into that. So I began to look for references that could disprove that statement, and I couldn't find them. In Ezekiel 13, verse 10, it says, because they have seduced my people, saying peace when there was no peace, and one built up a wall, and lo, others daubed it with untempered mortar, say unto them which daubed it with untempered mortar that it shall fall. So will I break down the wall that you have daubed with untempered mortar, and bring it to the ground, so that the foundation thereof shall be discovered. Many Christians are trying to build these relationships with the untempered mortar of trust. And that's one of the weaknesses in the church. And it will defeat the reconciliation movement unless we move beyond untempered mortar to the real mortar that God tells us about, which is love. Whether we're trusting ourselves or anyone else, it will never be successful. We're to trust in the Lord with all our heart. If I trust in the Lord with all of my heart, I have no heart left to trust you with. I'm to trust in the Lord with all my heart, and I'm to love others. I'm sure you're familiar with Psalm 118, verses 8 and 9. It says it's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust man. And as if we didn't get that, he said it's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes or special men. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, Psalm 3:5. Then Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Failed trust is love's test. Now, think for a second who you have been trusting. If that relationship were to collapse because you were betrayed, what would be your response? The way it works is this. If when the relationship collapses, it angers you, it's because you were trusting that person. If it breaks your heart, if it grieves you, it's because you loved that person. You see, you can't make a person who truly loves you mad. You can only break his heart. Grief only happens to those in love. Love is untempered mortar until it goes through the fire. The disappointment of failed trust puts love to the test. I asked a group one time, I said, can you love somebody that you cannot trust? And they looked kind of curiously and thought, and some shook their head no, some yes. I said, well, think about it. Can you love somebody you cannot trust? God loves you. God loves me, and I've disappointed him many times. One measure of our maturity is our ability to trust God and love people, even those we cannot trust. And God won't compete for our trust. He's a jealous God. That word in the Old Testament is about trust. The people were worshiping other gods, and God is a jealous God. He demands that we trust him. Jesus was betrayed. If we're going to learn how to face betrayal, and by the way, betrayal is built into the system. God provides our betrayers to teach us not to trust people. So not only are we to build our relationships on love, but we are to expect to be betrayed. And it's important that we know what to do when we are betrayed, because you will be, and I will be again, betrayed. Here's what Jesus did. 3 things. Number 1, he didn't let his immediate pain block out his ultimate purpose. You see, most of us, when we are betrayed, our immediate pain rises to the front and it becomes our focus, and we lose sight of our ultimate purpose. So think about your past betrayal. Did you let your immediate pain block out your ultimate purpose? Sometimes it takes time to get back to where our purpose is the forefront again. But now that you know this, you don't have to waste that time. Keep focused on your purpose, not on your pain. Number two, Jesus loved his betrayer. That's weird, isn't it? Well, not really. We're told to love our enemies. And a friend that betrays us is not necessarily our enemy, but certainly puts a demand on our love ability. We're to love those who betray us. It's interesting to me, looking back at it, how Jesus said to Peter, said to Judas when Judas came back to him, he said, "Why did you do this, friend?" He considered Judas his friend. In fact, Judas was the only one that missed the first Easter. I'm convinced that Jesus would have died for Judas alone, even after the betrayal. The question is, how have you treated those who have betrayed you? What have you done for them? Do good to those that despitefully use you. Pray for those who persecute you. How are you doing in that regard? It's a challenge. The third thing that Jesus did was he didn't drop out of the ministry. He was Jesus the healer, remember? And when the priest's ear, the high priest's servant's ear dropped to the ground, Jesus went over, picked it up, and put it back on his head, because that man's wife expected him to come home with 2 ears that night. Jesus was still Jesus the healer. I can't tell you how many pastors that I've seen drop out of the ministry because they were betrayed. Some of them selling insurance, some selling cars, some selling real estate. But all it took was a betrayal, and they lost their sight of ministry. Jesus didn't lose sight of his ministry. I've seen people in church say, well, if that's the way they're going to be, then she can have the Sunday school class. I'll just leave. That's what happens when you build relationships on trust rather than love. If we're going to build healthy, reconciled relationships between races, denominations, and else, we're going to have to get past this issue of demanding that we be trustworthy. Well, my goal is to be a trustworthy person, but my goal is never to put my ultimate trust in a person, but to put it in God alone. My father asked me one time, as I mentioned earlier, he was a pastor, and he said, "Eddie, how does God know you love him?" And I said, because I serve him. He said, no, in the Bible, how do you know that he loves you? I said, well, it's easy, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, for God so loved me that he gave. He said, how does God know you love him? I said, I don't know. I tell him I love him. He said, that's not how he will know. I said, how will he know? He said, it's 1 John 3:16. They will know that we love Jesus, because as he laid down his life for us, we will lay down our lives for each other. We must insist that love be the foundation of our relationships. Again, our marriages, our job relationships, our pastoral relationships with other pastors, within our church staffs, our relationships as members of churches and as churches together in the city. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll pray about this, and that you'll seek to build with tempered mortar, love. Love is that which holds the stones together.